day, but I'm feeling good today. So let's do this. All right. So trigger warning as always, guys. We will be going over the Complex PTSD workbook by Ariel Schwartz, and we're working on pages 26 through 32. The practices are on pages 31 and 32. So we will do the practices. I will do the practices on my personal reflections today, and then I'm also gonna read out a page from The Body Keeps the Score. I'm gonna read out of pages 42 and 43. Some interesting information that I've been reading. Anywhoosies, so let me see if I can adjust this. I bought me a new computer stand. Okay. All right. So we're starting on the Complex PTSD workbook first. I'm going to read it. So it says how CPTSD affects the mind and body. It says children require consistency. Caregivers who are predictable help children develop clear expectations about themselves and the world. Such predictability provides a groundwork of safety and allows a child to adapt to the many inner changes that they go through during early development. But this isn't the case in a household of neglect or abuse. CPTSD often arises out of interactions that occur in the first years of life. Sometimes the trauma begins within the first months of being born. Such early childhood memories are not like typical memories that occur later in life. You may not have images or a clear story. Instead, you might experience emotions without understanding why, or even physical sensations of unknown origin. Growing up afraid has ramifications on all aspects of development: cognitive, emotional, and physical. The costs of childhood trauma can persist into adulthood until you find sufficient support to heal your past. The most common experiences among individuals with CPTSD include cognitive distortions, which these include inaccurate beliefs about oneself, others, and the world. Emotional distress, frequent feelings of being overwhelmed, anxiety, helplessness, hopelessness, and despair. Also, deep loneliness, shame, unfairness, injustice, and depression and suicidal thoughts are often triggered by social loss, abandonment, and disconnection. Disturbing somatic sensations, which are historical threats, are maintained as uncomfortable body sensations or somatization in which psychological distress presents in the form of physical symptoms. Disorientation, inaccurate beliefs, emotions, and body sensations contribute to a loss of distinction between the past and the present. Hypervigilance, high sensitivity to tracking nuances and subtleties in body language and facial expressions within other people is developed as an attempt to keep oneself safe. Avoidance. Avoidance involves learned patterns of shutting out or pushing away uncomfortable sensations, memories, or emotions. This is often maintained by defenses such as denial, repression, disassociation, or addictive behaviors. Other symptoms of CPTSD. Additional symptoms that are common among individuals with CPTSD include feelings of irritability, self harm, self injury, such as cutting one's own skin or pulling hair out, eating disorders such as binge eating, bulimia, and anorexia, emotional eating, social anxiety, agoraphobia or paranoia, difficulty concentrating, impulsivity or recklessness, excessive risk taking and promiscuity, outbursts of anger, suicidal thoughts, plans or attempts, addiction, difficulty maintaining a job. A diagnosis is a good thing, not a bad thing. Keep in mind that an accurate diagnosis becomes a part of your growing toolbox of knowledge that will help you better understand yourself and move forward with wisdom. A diagnosis can allow you and your treatment providers to work together to face and address your symptoms. Another one is interpersonal problems. Ineffective interpersonal relationship dynamics, including withdrawing from, blaming, pushing away, or criticizing friends and loved ones unnecessarily. Patterns learned within dysfunctional family symptoms systems tend to get repeated in adulthood until new and effective interpersonal strategies are developed. Brain development. Abuse and neglect produce measurable changes in brain structures that are associated with deficits in social skills and academic success. Health problems. Unresolved CPTSD is a significant cause of physical health concerns in adulthood. All right, we're going on to page 28. Says mental and emotional symptoms. The primary emotional and cognitive symptoms of CPTSD are a combination of avoidance symptoms, intrusive symptoms, and depressive symptoms. It is best to think of emotions as a combination of three forces: environment, body awareness or felt sense, and the mind, which makes meaning out of experiences based upon memories from the past. When you rely too heavily upon your trauma related feelings, it is common to react as if you're being hurt in the present moment when in fact you actually are loved and safe. As a result, you might jump too quickly to conclusions without pause for reflection. These inaccurate interpretations of events tend to lead to painful losses that could have otherwise been avoided. Jan struggled with strong feelings that influenced her interpretation of current events. For example, after work, her husband liked to watch TV as a way to decompress from a long day. Jan began to feel unimportant. "You don't really love me," she insisted angrily. When her husband turned off the TV and tried to connect, she pushed him away, saying, "If you really cared about me, I wouldn't have to beg for your attention." Shrugging his shoulders, her husband felt unable to help Jan feel his love for her. In some situations, you might feel emotionally overwhelmed. When you are flooded, you will have you will have a hard time effectively thinking your way through any situation. In fact, the emotion centers of the brain will activate, reducing brain activity in the parts responsible for rational thoughts, processes, and making decisions. Behaviors then become impulsive rather than reflective choices. Overreactive responses sit at one end of the emotions continuum. When you have a childhood history of abuse or neglect, it is also common to deny, disassociate, or shut down from pain. Lack of attention to your emotional world will leave you feeling disoriented. If you are intolerant of emotions, you will likely feel cut off, like something is missing, or as if you are just going through the motions. Emotions help give us purpose, meaning, and the experience of being alive. The butterflies in your stomach, a lump in your throat, beating of your heart, and the warmth in your face give you feedback about yourself and your world. So, um, when it talks about when you reply too heavily upon your trauma related feelings, it is common to react as if you are being hurt in the present moment, when in fact you actually are loved and safe. So, I've had a few, I have a few examples of what's happened to me. So, when I started dating after my second husband and I started dating my third husband, I didn't get any. I did get some counseling, but not. I don't believe that it was about counseling for relationships or anything like that. So I remember I was dating, and we were coming back from like a club or driving back from a club, and we were arguing about something, and he pulled over at a store, and he got off the car and opened my door, and I immediately started attacking him. And I did that because I was I had or I had well I have PTSD from the second marriage, where he always there was always DV going on, abuse going on in that relationship. And every time he'd get angry, he'd either punch holes in the wall, or he'd hit me or choke me or something. So over 10 years of going through that, I mean, the broken ribs twice, torn ligament in my arm, nearly snapped my neck. I mean, it was pretty bad. I even had broken hand, bruises, But anyway, so 10 years of that, and then I get into another relationship. And the first thing that I assume is this guy is going to put his hands on me, because I was so, I guess, traumatized from the previous relationship, that I thought that that's what he was getting off the car to do, was to come over to my side to, to hit me. So I immediately, as he opened the door, I was already like anxiety through the roof. And, I started attacking him to try to defend myself. And he wasn't doing anything but opening the door for me so that we could get a drink. But I'm thinking, we're arguing. That means he's going to put his hands on me, because that was what the PTSD basically that's what this is explaining. When you rely too heavily upon your trauma related feelings, it is common to react as if you are being hurt in the present moment, when in fact you actually are loved and safe. So so that happened. And I remember him being confused and being like, what are you doing? Like, why are you hitting me? And I felt stupid after the fact, and after my rational side kicked in, and I was able to, calm down. I was like, why did I react that way? But it was because of the PTSD that I had from the previous relationship, where it was a constant pattern where every time he got upset and we were arguing, more than likely, we were going to be fighting, and he was going to put his hands on me. So that was it was as if it was happening in the present moment. That's how I take that sentence, you know. And so then um there's another one where I so I met this girl at a job that I had. I was a hostess at this job, and we had regulars that would come in at this business, and I became friends with one of the people that were regulars there. Became friends with her and her husband, and one day after um, getting, just talking there at the job, she invited me over to, to come and hang out with them and have some beers and just, hang out and stuff. So I was like, okay. And so, hung out with them a few times and it was like for beers, we just, drink and listen to music. And another time was for a holiday. She invited me to come over and have dinner with her and her family. And they were watching a game or something. And then, and so at that time, I remember, um, I don't know if y'all have seen my video of the trauma, my story of what I've gone through. But basically, that night, um, we were drinking and the woman got really drunk. Like, I had never seen her that drunk before, but I guess this was common for her. But so I'm there at her house, and I was there maybe a couple hours or so. And I had told her, well, I really don't want to drink and then have to drive home. And, so I'd rather just not drink, I'd just hang out with you. And she was like, no, no, no. She was like, you can stay here. My daughter, is staying with her dad this weekend, so you can sleep in her room. And so I was like, okay. So I drank a few beers, and I remember she passed out, and I was trying to wake her up, like, because she was sitting there passing out. So I was trying to wake her up, and she would wake up for a little bit, and then she'd pass out again. Well, her boyfriend um, was trying to, like, get me to go over there to the bedroom where he was at, like trying to signal me to go over there. And I was like, what is this guy doing? Like, and it was freaking me out. I was ignoring him, and I was trying to wake the girl up, his girlfriend. I was like, hey, hey, wake up, because he was making me feel uncomfortable, right? But I had already had at least 3, 4 beers in my system, and I didn't want to chance it and stuff. So I kind of felt stuck, and I didn't know what to do. So I was just trying to wake her up. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to bed. And so I went into the room, the little girl's room, because she'd already showed me where I was going to sleep. So I went into her little girl's room, and I laid on the bed, and I closed the door behind me. And there was no lock on the door or anything, but I went and I closed it, and I lay down. And and I just was like, I'm just going to go to bed, call it a night, wake up in the morning and head home. And so then this guy, her boyfriend, opens the door to the bedroom, and he's like, hey, come out here, come, you want to have a cigarette with me, you want to come and smoke a cigarette? And I'm like, no, I don't smoke. And I'm like, I'm good. And so he closed the door. He was like, oh, all right. And he closed the door, he left. And so I went and I tried to go back to sleep. This guy shows up again at the door, opens the door again, and he's like, hey, come out here and come and have a beer with me. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm fine. Because he had already made me feel uncomfortable by calling me, like going like this to me, to go into the bedroom. And his girlfriend was right there. And I was like, what the hell? So anyway, I was already feeling really uncomfortable with that guy. And I told him no. And so next thing you know, when he asked me and I said no for the second time, he went and he sat on the bed where I was laying, and he started rubbing because I had the blanket, like a big comforter over me. and he started rubbing like the side of my thigh slash butt area. And I was like, froze. Like I automatically felt like I was a child again, and I was being um, SA'd by my stepfather. Like it threw me back into that, and I froze, and I just I just hit, like I just stayed really still. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even think straight. And he was just rubbing my that area, and he was like, "Come on, come outside," and blah blah. And and I'm like, "Can you leave me alone?" And he was like, "I'm just getting you to come outside, have a beer with me," and blah blah. And then after that, he just kept on, like, stayed there on the bed and rubbing that area. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And my heart was pounding, I was sweating. I felt like I was just having like the PTSD moment of, like, I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think straight, and I just didn't move. I was just like I couldn't breathe correctly. I was just in shock, I guess. And the book calls this, because there's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. For me, in that situation, I froze. And I had not experienced that, I think, since I was a child. And so anyway, he finally gave up after, like, not leaving me alone for like about an hour or so, an hour, that he kept on bugging and bugging for me to go outside with him, and then doing all that. And finally he just, because I acted like I just fell asleep. I think I was like pretending that I was falling asleep or something. I don't remember. And next thing you know, he leaves the room, and by this time it's already like probably, I don't know, 4 in the morning or something. And so I think he crashed out, like he went and he fell asleep, or he passed out or something. And I got up like around 7 in the morning when I woke up, and I was like, I'm out of here. I didn't even want to like talk to anybody. I was just trying to hurry up and get the heck out of there. It was such a horrifying experience, I felt like. And I don't believe that many people can understand what it feels like to really freeze and not know what to do, because um you're having like a flashback or PTSD moment. Anyway, so a year goes by, and I remember before that I had asked my oldest daughter. I said, "Do you think I should tell her?" But I didn't want to be like the reason why they were having issues or anything. So I just like never went back to their house ever again. And I really didn't call her after that. She tried to invite me over like maybe one other time, but I was yeah, and I went, but they were having like a big family get together or something, and I went with my daughter and my son-in-law, and I was like, "Can y'all go with me? Because I just I don't want to I don't want her to try to convince me to stay there." So we went, we spent time with her, and ate. And then I said, "Oh, yeah, well, I gotta go. My daughter, my son in law, gotta head back home for the kids and stuff." And so we left, and that was the last I heard of them. And then a year later, she calls me, and she's like, "How have you been?" And this was around COVID time. "How have you been?" And blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Oh, good. I had COVID for a few weeks, but I'm coming out of it. I'm doing better." And so then she's like, "I haven't heard from you. You haven't been around." And I'm like, I didn't know. I just was like, I wasn't gonna say anything because I didn't want to be in the middle of all that mess. Well, because I didn't say anything, I know this probably has nothing to do with, but this is part of the story that of what happened. But because I didn't say anything, I don't know what was going on between them, of what they were having issues about. But he ended up telling her that I had come on to him. And I remember her questioning me about that, and I'm like, "No, let me just be honest with you about what happened. I just didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be the problem of y'all breaking up or like having issues or whatever. So I just stayed away. And so I told her the whole story of what happened and how I froze, and she could not understand why I just didn't get up and wake her up and or call her and let her know what was happening or what had happened, and I was like, I froze, like I literally froze. I couldn't move. I was like, I was, and I told her the story of my childhood trauma and how when I froze, it threw me back. I was having a PTSD moment or just a moment that I had a flashback, and I couldn't move, and I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't leave because I had already had several beers in my system, and I didn't want to chance that, so I just kind of felt trapped there until the early morning when I was sure that I was sober, and so when I explained to her, and she went back and had conversation with that guy, her boyfriend, she ended up believing her boyfriend. She believed her boyfriend, and she accused me of, you know, I guess she was blaming me for it, because she believed what he was saying and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want any part of this. Like, I cannot believe that I'm being open and honest with you what happened. But like, I guess for her, because I wasn't honest from the beginning, and I'm like, if I don't know, common sense to me would tell you that if I was really trying to do something with him, I would have tried to hang out with them a lot more often, and not not disappeared. You know what I'm saying? And I did the total opposite. I disappeared because I wanted no part of any of that mess that was going on in their relationship. So, anyways, but that was an example of I can give you that of what happened in my childhood and me having a flashback. I had a trigger. That dude triggered me by him touching me in my side of my hip slash butt area and rubbing that area, that it freaking froze me. And if you've never been through that, it is a horrific experience. You can't think straight, you're sweating, your anxiety is through the roof, you're breathing really hard. Um, you just you feel trapped in your own body. I felt trapped in my own body because I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think straight. I mean, it was horrible. But anyway, so that was another example. Another example that I can give about that, when you rely too heavily upon your trauma related feelings, it is common to react as if you are being hurt in the present moment when in fact you actually are loved and safe. Um, well, there was another thing that I went through when I was dating my third husband, and um, with my second husband, he used to go on these drug binges. So when he would, I guess, get tempted and he'd go on his drug binges, he would have a tendency to shut off his phone, completely turn it off. And anyway, so after 10 years of him doing that to me, um, when I got with my third husband, we were dating. Anytime that he would shut off his phone, or he wouldn't answer his phone, I would start having like anxiety, panic attacks, because I remember whenever that would happen with my second husband, that he would go on these drug binges, he would usually try to pull out a whole bunch of money out of our bank and leave me completely broke, no money for Pampers or for diapers or milk or anything for the kids, no rent. I mean, he would go spend it all. And so it would put me in this mode of like, oh crap, I got to go get the money out of the bank like quickly, like ASAP, And so it would throw me into these panic attacks whenever my third husband would do that, even though there was nothing. He could be at work and he couldn't answer the phone because he was working, But because he didn't answer the phone, I would have this overwhelming sensation that something was wrong, something was wrong, something's wrong. He's doing something, something's not right. He's doing something that he shouldn't be doing because of the trauma that I had experienced with my second husband doing that to me. And every time he would do it, it was because he was on his drug binge again. And he was, you know, trying to take all the money out of our bank or trying to sell our stuff, anything he could get his hands on to get his drugs and stuff. So anyway, that's another example of kind of the old trauma is still replaying in the present moment, even though you are not going through the same thing, or you're in a safe place, but your brain is still reacting as if you are still living through that trauma that you lived through 5, 10, 20 years ago. Anyway, so those are some examples of what I've experienced, from what I read on here, on that paragraph. So right here where it says, in fact, the emotion centers of the brain will activate, reducing brain activity in the parts responsible for rational thought processes and making decisions. Behaviors then become impulsive rather than reflective choices. When you have a childhood history of abuse or neglect, it is also common to deny, disassociate, or shut down from the pain. And on this part, I wanted to go and go into the Body Keeps a Score book on page 42 and 43. I'm going to read you those 2 pages because it is, I mean, I was shocked when I read this. So right here, I'm going to show you the picture of the brain scans that they show you on the book, okay? The first one is the right limbic area that they're pointing to, which is A. Picture B is the visual cortex that they're pointing to, and picture C is the Broca's area that they're pointing to. Look at that close. Oh, wrong way. Look at that closely. I don't know if you can see it. I'm trying to get it as close as possible. But yeah, so those are the brain scans and that I'm talking about. It says, picturing the brain on trauma. Bright spots in picture A, the limbic brain, and B, the visual cortex, show heightened activation. In drawing C, the brain speech center shows markedly decreased activation. As she emerged from the scanner, they're talking about Marcia. Marcia was a teacher who was driving, and her daughter took her seatbelt off while she was driving. And when she went to reach back to put the seatbelt back on, her car came and smashed right into the right side of the car where her daughter was, the side where her daughter was, and her daughter passed. And so she was super traumatized from that. She had to stop being a teacher because the children that she was teaching would I guess bring overwhelming emotions to her. So it's talking about, as Marcia emerged from the scanner, Marcia looked defeated, drawn out, and frozen. I would have to go to 42 so y'all can understand what we're okay. So anyway, okay, so several days later, the participants came to the imaging lab. Marcia, a 42-year-old school teacher from a suburb outside of Boston, was the first volunteer to be scanned. Her script took her back to the day 13 years earlier when she picked up her 5-year-old daughter, Melissa, from the day camp. As they drove off, Marcia heard a persistent beeping indicating that Melissa's seatbelt was not properly fastened. Oh, okay. So the seatbelt wasn't properly fastened. When Marcia reached over to adjust the belt, she ran a red light. Another car smashed into hers from the right, instantly killing her daughter. In the ambulance on the way to the emergency room, the 7-month-old fetus Marcia was carrying also died. So she was pregnant and the fetus also had died. Overnight, Marcia had changed from a cheerful woman who was the life of the party into a haunted and depressed person filled with self-blame. She moved from classroom teaching into school administration because working directly with children had become intolerable, as for many parents who have lost children. Their happy laughter had become a powerful trigger. Even hiding behind her paperwork, she could barely make it through the day. In a futile attempt to keep her feelings at bay, she coped by working day and night. I was standing outside the scanner as Marcia underwent the procedure and could follow her psychological reactions on a monitor. The moment we turned on the tape recorder, her head started to race, her blood pressure jumped. Simply hearing the script activated the same psychological responses that had occurred during the accident 13 years earlier. After the recorded script concluded and Marcia's heart rate and blood pressure returned to normal, we played her second script, getting out of bed and brushing her teeth. This time her heart rate and blood pressure did not did not change. As she emerged from the scanner, Marcia looked defeated, drawn out, and frozen. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes were opened wide, and her shoulders were hunched. The very image of vulnerability and defensivelessness. We tried to comfort her, but I wondered if whatever we discovered would be worth the price of her distress. After all 8 participants completed the procedure, Scott Roch went to work with his mathematicians and statistics people to create composite images that compared to the arousal created by a flashback with the brain in neutral. After a few weeks, he sent me the results, which you see above on the scanned images. I taped the scans on the refrigerator in my kitchen, and for the next few months, I stared at them every evening. It occurred to me that this was how early astronomers must have felt when they peered through a telescope at a new constellation. There were some puzzling dots and colors on the scan, but the biggest area of brain activation, a large red spot in the right lower center of the brain, which is the limbic area, or called the emotional brain, came as no surprise. It was already well known that intense emotions activate the limbic system, in particular, an area within it called the amygdala. We depend on the amygdala to warn us of impending danger and to activate the body's stress response. Our study clearly showed that when traumatized people are presented with images, sounds, or thoughts related to their particular experience, the amygdala reacts with alarm, even as in Marcia's case, 13 years after the event. Activation of this fear center triggers the cascade of stress hormones and nerve impulses that drive up blood pressure, heart rate, and oxygen intake, preparing the body for fight or flight. The monitors attached to Marcia's arms recorded this psychological state of frantic arousal, even though she never totally lost track of the fact that she was resting quietly in the scanner. Our most surprising finding was a white spot in the left frontal lobe of the cortex in a region called Broca's area. In this case, the change in color meant that there was a significant decrease in that part of the brain. Broca's area is one of the speech centers of the brain, which is often affected in stroke patients when the blood supply to that region is cut off. Without a functioning Broca's area, you cannot put your thoughts and feelings into words. Our scans showed that Broca's area went offline whenever a flashback was triggered. In other words, we had visual proof that the effects of trauma are not necessarily different from and can overlap with the effects of physical lesions like strokes. All trauma is pre-verbal. Shakespeare captures this state of speechless terror in Macbeth after the murdered king's body is discovered. Ho, oh horror, 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 tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. Confusion how now hath made his masterpiece. Under extreme conditions, people may scream obscenities, call for their mothers, howl in terror, or simply shut down. Victims of assaults and accidents sit mute and frozen in emergency rooms. Traumatized children lose their tongues and refuse to speak. Photographs of combat soldiers show hollow eyed men staring mutely into a void. Even years later, traumatized people often have enormous difficulty telling other people what has happened to them. Their bodies re experience terror, rage, and helplessness, as well as the impulse to fight or flee. But these feelings are almost impossible to articulate. Trauma by nature drives us to the edge of comprehension, cutting us off from language based on common experience or an imaginable past. This doesn't mean that people can't talk about a tragedy that has befallen them. Sooner or later, most survivors, like the veterans in chapter 1, come up with what many of them call their cover story that offers some explanation for their symptoms and behavior for public consumption. These stories, however, rarely capture the inner truth of the experience. It is enormously difficult to organize one's traumatic experiences into a coherent account, a narrative with the beginning, a middle, and an end. Even a seasonal reporter like the famed CBS correspondent Ed Murrow struggled to convey the atrocities he saw when the Nazi concentration camp Buchenwald was liberated in 1945. I pray you believe what I have said. I reported what I saw and heard, but only part of it. For most of it, I have no words. So it says when words fail, haunting images capture the experience and return as nightmares and flashbacks. In contrast to the deactivation of Broca's area, another region, Brodmann's area 19, lit up in our participants. This is a region in the visual cortex that registers images when they first enter the brain. We were surprised to see brain activation in this area so long after the original experience of the trauma. Under ordinary conditions, raw images registered in Area 19 are rapidly diffused to other brain areas that interpret the meaning of what has been seen. Once again, we were witnessing a brain region rekindled as if the trauma were actually occurring. As we will see in chapter 12, which discusses memory, other unprocessed sense fragments of trauma, like sounds and smells and physical sensations, are also registered separately from the story itself. Similar sensations often trigger a flashback that brings him back into consciousness, apparently unmodified by the passage of time. I'm telling you guys, this book is it has blown my mind. Like it's so good. We bought one for my my husband's niece. She's going to school also for psychology. and she'll be done in about a year. But she started reading it, and as soon as you open the book, it just grabs your attention because it is, I mean, it has you like at the edge of your seat. It's like a good movie, that a good action movie that has you at the edge of your seat. That's what I can compare this book to. And it also, this is also the book that started, as I'm reading, I'm processing, and I'm also seeing my symptoms in the stories, of what I've gone through. And I'm seeing the how trauma has affected me, how trauma has also spilled into my kids, and how now as adults they are also um, struggling with the trauma that has spilled into my kids, for the bad decisions that I made based on my trauma that I went through as a child. And I know that, it wasn't my fault, as far as like I didn't know, like there's a lot of things that I didn't know and I didn't learn, and I didn't go to, like, my parents never took me to therapy, or it was just that one time that I think that they took me to a counselor, and after that I never went to another session like that. And um so I get that. Like I get, I need to be easier on myself because I didn't know any better. But this is why, it is so important that we do the work, guys. And if you have little ones, I know it is tough. I know to do the work and to face your trauma is really, it's really tough. And but it takes a lot of courage to confront that trauma. But this is what we I wish that I would have done. I would have known about when I was younger, so that I would have raised my kids with minimal amount of trauma that I could possibly raise them with, if possible, like no trauma, but you know, um, I'm doing the work now, and that's what's important. I think that we, as hard as it can get sometimes, and we need to step away from it for a bit and get ourselves, together again. Um, we got to come back and do the work, for the sake of our kids, and so that our trauma doesn't spill into our children, and our kids can live a healthier, happier life than what we did, And so anyway, so that's a part of the that book I wanted to read y'all because of where we're at, and it talks about all of that. So it kind of coincides with the Complex PTSD workbook that I'm reading. So let's keep going on to the Complex PTSD workbook, which is page 29. It says the emotion. Hold on. Emotions help give us purpose, meaning, and the experience of being alive. The butterflies in your stomach, lump in your throat, beating of your heart, and the warmth in your face give you feedback about yourself and your world. The aim is to find a balance between thinking and feeling in order to have healthy empathy, develop successful relationships, and make effective decisions. Let's look at the emotional and cognitive symptoms of CPTSD. Avoidance symptoms. Kevin has smoked pot for many years. Now his wife wants to have a child and has asked him to stop. Reluctantly, he came to therapy after his wife threatened that if he didn't stop, she would leave him. Exploring Kevin's childhood history, I learned of his father's anger and rage. Kevin shrugged his shoulders, stating casually, "Yeah, he pushed me around, but it's not a big deal." Within the safety of therapy, we began to acknowledge that indeed his father's behaviors had a significant impact on his emotional life. He began to address his own anger about his childhood. I feel like I've gotten this response from my son, who is 21, when I have told him that he needs to go to counseling and work on, the trauma that he's gone through. He watched me getting beat up and fighting back to defend myself as well. And, a whole toxic relationship that he watched for the first 6 years of his life. His dad punching holes in the wall and going and just wreaking havoc because of his drug addiction and trying to break into our house to like steal toys. Yeah, toys and anything that was of value that he could sell, that he could get his hands on to sell so he can get his drugs. And he went through all that. So, but he diminishes it and makes it seem like it ain't a big deal. Like, oh, I'm not gonna sit here and cry about it. What it is, what it is, and I just gotta. It doesn't bother me, and I gotta keep moving forward. I'm just trying to live my life. And to me, I feel like it's just because he doesn't want to face. He doesn't want to face the hurt and the pain that is in there because it's too much for him right now, maybe, or he feels it's going to be too much. But that's how I felt too with my own trauma for the first 38 years of my life, and it just started coming out on its own, and I couldn't stop it, and so I had to work on it. And so, anyways, he began to address his own anger about his childhood. In order to get away from memories of childhood trauma, it is common to develop avoidance strategies. Sometimes this involves avoiding situations, people, and places that serve as a reminder of the past. Repressing feelings, idealizing parents, minimizing the pain, or disassociating. It is common to use substances or maintain other addictive behaviors such as emotional eating or excessive exercising to avoid feeling pain. My son he works out all the time. He's really buff because he's always at the gym. So intrusive symptoms. Get away from me, screamed Helen in the middle of the night. Another nightmare woke her up from a deep sleep. She has been haunted by these dreams for as long as she can remember. Helen came into my office because she had not been able to concentrate on her college classes. For the first time, she began to talk about her father and how uncomfortable she was when he would come into her room at night. She needed somebody to help her sort out what happened. Understanding disassociation. Disassociation, like all other symptoms of CPTSD, is a learned behavior that initially helped you cope with threatening environment. A neglected or abused child will rely upon built-in biological protection mechanisms for survival to tune out threatening experiences. In adulthood, disassociation becomes a well maintained division between the part of you involved in keeping up with daily tasks of living and the part of you that is holding emotions of fear, shame, or anger. You might feel that it's just too much to think about what happened. When emotions or body sensations come to the surface of your awareness, it is common to instinctively push the scary, yucky, painful, or confusing feelings far away by resorting to learned dissociative patterns. Symptoms of disassociation exist on a continuum and can be relatively mild, such as feeling foggy or fuzzy, having a hard time talking about experiences, or feeling tired. You might feel distracted or have difficulty concentrating. You might feel numb or cut off. More intense symptoms include feeling out of control, having lapses of memory, or experiencing lost time. You can heal disassociation by developing the capacity to recognize that traumatic events happen to you and that they are over now. You develop the capacity to realize that traumatic events influence your sense of self and your basic assumptions about the world. Healing disassociation involves differentiating between the past and the present, and you can do so by cultivating mindful awareness of the here and now. Re experiencing symptoms such as anxiety, flashbacks, hypervigilance, or nightmares is among the most common disturbances in individuals with PTSD. Hypervigilance involves being on guard or highly sensitized to your surroundings in order to keep yourself safe. Re experiencing symptoms related to early childhood memories from before you could even speak may come in the form of a vague, uncomfortable felt sense or physical pain. High arousal symptoms characterized by feelings such as anxiety, aggression, and irritability are often experienced by individuals with CPTSD. These often manifest in what is known as emotional dysregulation or sweeping emotions of sadness, rage, or fear. These can feel intrusive or even hijack your relationship to yourself, your family, and your world, and can result in feeling stuck in patterns of disconnection, resentment, or abandonment with family and friends. Depressive symptoms. Andrew grew up Andrew grew up in a home where he felt let's see if I can put it up here. Andrew grew up in a home where he felt responsible for his alcoholic mother. Sadly, she never recovered despite his many attempts to help her. As an adult, he continues to feel ineffective at work. When he receives any critical feedback from his boss, he feels deeply rejected and thinks, what is the point of trying? High arousal symptoms are one side of the CPTSD equation. Low arousal symptoms such as hopelessness, despair, and depression reside on the other side. These symptoms typically result from living in a threatening environment with no escape. When you have no ability to change your situation, you may be left feeling ineffective, powerless, and helpless. Shame and unworthiness are signature depressive symptoms of CPTSD. Now let's go on to the practice. The following questions will help you identify your own emotional and cognitive symptoms of CPTSD. What avoidance symptoms, such as denial, repression, idealization, minimization, addictions, disassociation, do you experience? In what ways do these symptoms get in the way of you living the life you want? So, I think for me, I've struggled more with I think I've struggled with disassociation for sure, and I guess minimization maybe, because uh, even though my stepfather did what he did to me from the age of 2 to 13, 14 or so, um, I would act as if nothing happened and still be come around him and you know call him dad and you know just just act like no like nothing happened and just pretend like none of that happened and keep going about the holidays or whatever, visiting or whatever when my mom was alive and my sisters, visiting my sisters. And I find that really tough to do now. Really tough because I'm no longer there anymore. And even though he's asked for forgiveness and I have forgiven, um, I don't feel, I don't know, I don't feel like I need to be around him. It's just not, I never really developed emotions, I don't think, for him because of all the trauma he put me through. But I really don't feel like I need to be around him. I don't, it doesn't feel right. Something does not feel right about being around him, and I can't fake it anymore, and I can't minimize what he did, um, because I'm seeing, especially I think because I'm connecting the dots of how that trauma affected me throughout my entire life. And now, I'm connecting the dots on, everything I went through, and where it stemmed from, and how the trauma, it was interconnected to all my, you know, um, bad decisions. A lot of my trauma was connected to my bad decisions because I didn't even know I didn't know that toxicity in a relationship wasn't normal, because I grew up in that household where he was abusive towards my mom, and that's all I saw since I was 2. And then he, on top of that, he was doing what he was doing to me. So I've always seen that as normal. Like, I thought that was a norm. So I was in bad relationships because I didn't know what a healthy one was. And I hadn't had the therapy that I needed to be able to understand that. And so anyway, but yeah, I think that I deal a lot with I've dealt with disassociation and minimization. I don't know about denial, because I've never denied it. I don't think that goes with me. Repression, I don't think that's repression. Any of that was repression. I mean, mm, okay. So the next question on page 32: what intrusive symptoms such as anxiety, flashbacks, nightmares, hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, interpersonal problems do you experience? In what ways do these symptoms interfere with your life now? I would say intrusive symptoms for me have been hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, um, and I used to have a lot of nightmares. But I don't think that the nightmares were not about my childhood. The nightmares came from the really abusive relationships that I was in, and just horrible relationships that I was in. And I think that I was always dreaming about that person hurting me, or like putting their hands on me, or finding out that I'm now in a, even with like my partner now, when we were first started dating, like I would dream that now that I was in this relationship, that those toxic abusive people would find me and would try to hurt him or me, or stuff like that. Those were what my nightmares would be about. But eventually, after being in this relationship for many years, for several years, um, that's when they started subsiding, the nightmares, I noticed. And I was doing the work on myself too. Started doing the work on myself at 38, and I've been working on myself little at a time. And so I think that's what helped my nightmares go away. I don't really have nightmares much anymore. And my partner actually went through that too. He used to have a lot of nightmares when he was in the toxic relationship with his ex, and and so after he got out of that relationship, being away from that toxicity for a couple years helped him to not have so many nightmares anymore. But yeah, so that's where we're gonna end it, because we're already at an hour, guys. I think we're at an hour and 5 minutes. It was kind of long, but I thought this book was really good, and I wanted to read some of this to y'all, because I mean, I'm just blown away by this. This book has really like gotten my attention. This book is good too, but I think because I really love like the actual stories, the real stories of the people on here. And this is like just a workbook of the work that we're trying to work on. But I like the personal stories on this book of what it talks about, the different examples of the different people that went through different types of trauma and how they have reacted, how their body has reacted or their brain has reacted, and all the studies that they're doing on that they did on these people, and all of that is so like interesting to me, like super intriguing. So anyway, I keep on saying I got to cut it off, and I'm already still bad, keep going and going. All right, bye guys, I gotta go. Sorry it was so long. Bye.